This episode is brought to you by Hack Motion. Hack Motion is a cutting-edge wrist sensor for teaching wrist motion for a compressed tour-like shot. I spent some time with these guys last year at the show and have become part of the company, and I'm all in. So I presented for them at the PGA show last year, which was a great opportunity, and use it pretty much on a daily basis. And it's used by so many top coaches now. My friend Scott Calks, I know Brian Manzella, and James Lights. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are out there using this, and I'm happy to inform you that there is a new version coming out with trail wrist data, because it was just lead wrist before. So trail wrist data, I am actually testing that right now, and there'll be a lot of information coming out here in the near future. I know David Orr's doing some stuff, and Phil Kenyon's doing some stuff with putting, and I will be testing that as well. So I will be presenting at the PGA show virtual this year for them for a second time. So I'm excited about that. So go check it out, hackmotion.com. I think it's an awesome training aid, and I appreciate their support of the show. This episode is brought to you by InVeedHemp.com. InVeed has been my choice for my CBD needs for almost a year now, and I can't begin to tell you how it has improved my life. They come in 3 formulas: Clarity, Relief, and Relax. I take a Clarity drop in the morning with my coffee to get me focused, then a drop of Relief for my aches and pains and inflammation after a run or a workout. Then I do a drop of the Relax before I go to bed to help me sleep. I've gotten some of the best sleep that I've had in years, and now with my Whoop band, my recovery band, I can prove it. And now they've come out with a new mixture called Immunity, which we all need to stave off COVID-19. The Immunity Boost is a mixture of turmeric, grapefruit extract, elderberry, licorice root, and vitamin C, which we all could use a little bit more, I'm sure. I just got my first shipment in and took my first drop this morning. They come in drops, which is my choice, a tincture, roll-ons for those aches and pains, and then also gummies, which I think a lot of people out there use the gummies. So you can get it however you choose. So go place your order today. Go to InVeedHemp.com and use the code GURU20 for a 20% discount for life. CBD is a great supplement to keep you healthy and safe during these crazy times. So let's get to this week's episode.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. You're like a miniature Buddha covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1, no touching of the hair or face.
Of course.
And that's it! Now let's do this!
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Golf Guru Show. I am Jason Sutton, and I am the Guru, where it is my mission to interview the top golf instruction minds in the business, or high performers in all fields of study. I break them down, get them to share all their stories, best practices, and information that have made them successful, and then share it with all of you so we can grow together as coaches and as human beings. Thanks again for all your support of the podcast, and make sure you download this episode and hit that purple subscribe button so you don't miss any future shows that are coming your way. I am so excited about my guest on this episode. It is none other than PGA and LPGA Tour coach, Mr. Kevin Kirk. He has a very extensive resume, but here are a few of the highlights. Kevin was the 2019 PGA National Teacher of the Year. He is the Director of Instruction at the Woodlands Golf Performance Center in Houston, Texas, and coaches several PGA and LPGA players such as Masters champ Patrick Reed, Johnny Vegas, Graham McDowell, Mark Hubbard, and also works with Lexi Thompson, and then coached Maria Virchanova in the Olympic Games as she broke the scoring record with a 62. He has a great story about that here in our conversation. So to set the scene, Kevin and I were presenting at the PGA Magazine Teacher of the Year Conference this year at Pinehurst, which was an outstanding event and brought us together, which was really cool. And he was gracious enough to sit down with me in the Ryder Cup Lounge over a glass of wine and share his awesome story and his wisdom. And you'll hear a lot of background noise because we have a little bit of a crowd that we're kind of hanging out, listening to the combo as well. But after spending a few days with Kevin, I can tell you that this guy personifies what I would consider a true, well-rounded coach. Not just a great teacher, but a coach. And we struck up a nice friendship right away, as I just felt like we knew each other for forever, even though we thought we had met each other. And I know we've run in similar circles and have a lot of mutual friends. So we got on, really, really well right away. Felt like we had known each other forever. So there's so many great takeaways and stories from this conversation that's full of great information I know is going to help you in your life and in your coaching and in your teaching. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. So without further delay, I bring you my friend, Mr. Kevin Kirk. Got the nice ambiance.
Yeah, it is.
Of the crowd.
At the Ryder Cup bar at Pinehurst.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's just go for it, man.
Let's do it.
So, Kevin, welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for coming on. This is really going to be exciting. I'm happy that you could do this.
Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate it. I know this was really kind of spontaneous, but that's kind of the way we roll, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So, set the scene. We're at the PGA Magazine Teacher of the Year Conference. You were National Teacher of the Year last year, which is amazing, right? So, tell us a little bit about how that sort of affected your career, or what that meant to you, I guess, more importantly.
Yeah, like most guys, I coach because I enjoy coaching, and I've not really chased things down. I feel like a little bit about like a Forrest Gump, I just kind of stumble along, and I wake up in the middle of these magical moments. And I woke up one day, and there I am. I'm just right in the middle of accepting an award for being the PGA National Teacher of the Year, and initially I was a little bit unnerved by it all. It was almost like too much. I'm not really somebody that seeks out a lot of attention, so I was a bit uncomfortable with it at first.
Sure.
But as I've spent the last year thinking about it and reflecting on what it really means, I've actually kind of grown into it, and I think I appreciate it every day a little bit more. The guys that preceded me on that list, and Mark Blackburn this year, are all such incredible teachers. To be included in that in that list with those guys it's a true honor, and I'm deeply humbled by it all.
Yeah. So I want to start in a place that doesn't necessarily have to do with golf, but I feel like we're kindred spirits in the fact that, and probably everybody here that is high performers in whatever field that you're sort of achieving in, and that's the continuous learning gene, right? How do we get better? So a word, Kaizen, gets thrown around a lot in our business, right? And I think in a lot of different businesses. So explain what Kaizen means, and then also like how that has affected your career and then your personal growth.
Yeah, so Kaizen is a Japanese term for continuous improvement, and it's really a philosophy that really drove the Japanese Industrial Revolution. And I picked it up somewhere along the way. I was reading, and immediately when I recognized that term, I'm like, that's it. That's what I've been doing. I wake up every day, I'm trying to get a little bit better at things. Whether it's my craft, whether it's my my soul, whatever it is that I'm trying to be, my husband, a dad, whatever it is. Yeah. I wake up every day and I'm just like, okay, I've got to try to get a little bit better at this today. And so, what does that mean? It's the pursuit of that is endless, and it leads. It's led me into some unbelievable places and met unbelievable people. And here's another Kaizen moment that I'm getting to kind of ride out with you. So,
well, you're very nice to say that, because. I was excited when you were going to be a presenter here at the workshop, and to get to meet you finally, because I feel like we were talking at lunch today. Like I feel like we've known each other, but we just run in similar circles, and we have similar, a lot of friends that we've known for years. So where do you think that continuous learning gene comes from? Like take me back to like your childhood. Is it somebody that influenced you, that inspired you early on? Was it your parents? Like, and we can obviously get in. I want to get into your story of like how you got to where you are today, but I'm always curious about high performers and sort of, was there a moment that said, you know, hey, I want to be better, or I want to do something different, think outside the box?
Yeah, I think, part of it's nature, part of it's nurture. I mean, some of it's the spirit that you come with, and then the other part of it is learned as you go along the way. And I think my spirit by nature I don't rest well. I feel like I'm just always trying to,
I'm with you.
I'm uneasy kind of sitting still. So it's almost like I've got to have something, the direction that energy goes becomes pretty important, because it can go bad also if you don't steer it the right direction.
Absolutely.
So, my dad was really kind of an interesting guy. He was grew up as a sharecropper up in the Panhandle, and then he and his brother broke out of there and changed their lives. And really, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about my dad was his ability to think outside the box. I mean, he lived outside the box, he thought outside the box, and that gave me permission to do the same thing. And most of the things that I've done, the approaches I've taken to things, have not followed logic or reason. It's really been mostly outside the box. I think if people would watch me and observe me, it all looks outside the box.
Sure.
And but it seems reasonable to me, and so it's part of that capacity to think outside the box and not be fearful of it. And the other part is just my Kaizen spirit.
Yeah, I love that. So obviously, your dad set the example. Your parents set the example, or gave you the environment, right?
Yeah, I mean,
created the environment.
It's almost like it gives you permission, because you've seen it done. You've seen, okay, yeah, it can be risky, but there's massive rewards, and if you just got a little bit of a stomach for it all, you can do it, and you live with the really cool things that happen. You learn from the mistakes you make.
So where did you grow up, and like how did you get into golf or into other sports?
So my dad was working in the oil field, and so I was born in Texas, and then when we were 2, we were transferred overseas. And so I spent the majority of my childhood in the oil fields around the world, mostly in South America and Africa. So spent most of my time there. I didn't move back into the States until I was in high school. And so living overseas was great, because I mean you get to see different cultures. You get to see, I mean, you see things so differently. I mean, you can develop kind of a global perspective, and you realize that people around the world are all pretty much the same, and they, as much as we want to try to make them different, we're all kind of wired up the same. And so I think really living overseas kind of impacted really a lot about the way I see the world today.
Yeah.
My dad was taking up the game about the time I was born, so when it was his turn to look after me, we were at the course. And so I don't remember starting golf. It was just something I always did. The other thing, so I played since I really literally cannot remember hitting my first shot. Living overseas, I also had a chance to play a lot of sports, and there was a lot of also just free play. I mean, running and biking and swimming and playing tennis and throwing rocks and climbing trees and playing all the other sports you could possibly imagine. So my physical literacy was really high. I developed a really high level of athleticism and physical literacy. And then when I got back to the States, there was this opportunity to join the high school golf team. And so at that point in time, I really narrowed my focus down from this kind of this crazy multi-sport thing into more of a single channel for golf, and I pursued that until I was probably in my late 20s. I did have some sporting activity after that. I became a pretty good triathlete once I retired from playing competitive golf, and I did that for about 10 years. And so I've always had my hand in athletics and movement and sport, and but the golf component was the part that really was tested me and kind of took me to my knees, and is probably the sport that I learned the most from.
So when you were coming up, and you skipped a few steps there, obviously. So you went to college. Like, talk about a little bit how you got to college. Yeah. Did you have any early influences, like coaches that helped you? Did you take lessons? Were you involved in any kind of programs? Like, take us through that before we get to your teaching career. Yeah. Because obviously, if you played professionally 10 years, that's pretty darn good. Yeah. So at a high level.
Yeah. So I was fortunate, and when we lived in Venezuela, I ran across a young golf pro who was had been to the States. He spoke pretty good English. My Spanish was good, and so, but he loved golf, and he was fundamentally had really good fundamentals, and really taught me a real solid set of fundamentals. And so, about the time that I was 12 or so, I ran into him, and he really helped formulate my early learnings in golf. And still to this day, the things that he works on my staff, I still stay in really close contact with him.
That's so cool.
And the things he talks about today are as relevant as they were then. And so I was lucky in that I got a sense of really a good formation of, basic fundamentals. I got to the States when I was about 15 or so. I had a chance to go see Bob Tosky, so he looked after me from the time I was 16 till I was 29.
Really?
And so, so I spent a lot of time around Bob. And during that time, I went off to see a lot of other coaches, Mike Adams, Mike LeBeau, anybody that would take my money, really. And, because I had that curiosity, that Kaizen spirit, and I would go see him, and I would come back to Bob, and I'd run it by him. What do you think about this? And he would help me decipher and say, some of this is pretty good. I want to leave this other stuff alone. So having him in my life was just a blessing in so many ways. I mean, he taught me so many cool things, and he was such a cool guy, and I shudder to imagine where I'd be today if I hadn't run across him. That's for sure.
So what's your best Bob Tosky story, if you can remember?
There are so many. The one I remember, there was a lot of them, but the funniest thing I'll ever remember, we're on the range one day, and he would teach me, and then he'd also have these other guys that come out and take lessons, right? So he and I worked in the morning. We'd had lunch, and he had a couple guys that were going to come out, and they were going to go play. So we're on the range. He's got this guy out there. He's about 65 years old, and it's in Florida. It's hot. It's so hot. Sweat. We're all sweating bullets. And this guy comes out and starts hitting these shots and tops a few. And so Bob grabs a hold of the club, and he says, as he would do, and he kind of get underneath the guy and starts moving the club around. He goes, all right, it needs to feel more like this. He's looking at the guy. He says, can you feel that? And the guy says, yeah. So he rears back, and the same awful motion comes out. He goes, let's try it again. Lighten up that grip pressure. Let me take you through it again. So he rears back and does it a couple more times. He goes, can you feel that? And the guy goes, no, I can't feel that. And he looks at him real curiously like, and he goes, all right, let me grab a hold of it again. Lighten up your grip pressure. And he kind of rears back and, can you feel that? No, I can't feel that. And he turns to him, and then he reaches down and bites his arm. And he goes, can you feel that? And I almost had a stroke. I'm looking at him. I said, shit, he just bit that guy. so anyway.
Classic.
And then, yeah. So anyway, but the cool thing about Bob was he was a gentle soul. He was really smart, but he was going to make sure he got his message across. And and high level theater was not past him. He could put on a show, and I there's so many cool things I admire about him. But he's been an incredible guy in my life, and somebody that
I was just say what a great mentor early on.
Yeah.
So where did you go from there? And then you started playing?
Well, actually, I'd gone to. I was a good high school player and had a nice amateur career. I went to Sam Houston State, and I played there. I was an All-American there, and we had really good college teams. We were in AIA. I'd had some opportunities to go to some other schools. And seen a bunch of my buddies that were good players that go sit on the bench someplace. And so I thought for me that it was going to be a better pathway to go someplace where I could play. And Sam Houston was right down the road. I knew some of the guys on the team. I felt like that I could start as a freshman. And so it was more important for me to go someplace where I felt like I was going to get some playing time. And so
with you.
So I took that on, and it was a great decision for me. We won a couple of national championships while I was there. It was a lot of fun. The guys on the team were like, we had great chemistry, and it was just a blast. And so I hung around there for 4 years, woke up one day, and they handed me my degree. I could not believe it. And so I'm like, okay, so I guess that's over with. Now I got to go try to, decide what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And
right.
I'd had all the earmarkers of somebody who was going to be a good player. I was technically good. I was a hard worker. I was pretty wild, but I had a lot of discipline. And so finding money wasn't a problem. And I got some guys put up some money, and I went out and played. So I played from I graduated in 83, and I played from 83 through the end of 89.
So what was the tour back then? Was it nationwide?
The tour, there was no nationwide at that point in time. There was a tour that we played was called the Tpa Tour. So it was run by a guy named, last name Kidd, and he had $100,000 of money every week. And then we'd also tossed in I think all the players are tossed in $500 a piece, and it was an interesting tour because he played 2 courses every week. So all the guys would toss in 500, and we played. There was 300 players a week teed it up, so 2 courses, and then they would cut it down to like the top 90, and so the top 90 would play for every week for $250,000.
Wow.
So it was a pretty good tour, and,
Yeah.
and a lot of really good players played on that tour. And if you didn't have a card, if you did that, it was the NGA you could kind of play. You could play Space Coast, but this was kind of the bigger, more organized tour.
Do you remember any of the names back then that
Yeah,
made it?
Mark Calcavecchia came out of there.
Okay.
Greg Twiggs, Brian Clare played on that tour. Who else was on? The guy that won. Tom Lehman was on that tour.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there was a bunch of guys that could
Really play.
Some of the Oklahoma State guys. Willie Wood played the tour. Bob Tway played the tour. So it was a bunch of guys that could play. And the tour school was so hard at that point in time. I mean, to get to the finals and just a handful of cards every year. So it was hard. It was hard to kind of push through. But anyway, I gave it for 6 years, and I wrung myself out, and I woke up one day and I said, dude, I cannot do this anymore.
Did you ever go to Q school? Did you
Oh,
go
yeah,
to
every year.
You
I was living out there. I was my 35 weeks a year and tour school and the whole thing, and it was just, I just got myself to the end of my rope, and it was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't keep doing this.
Right.
And so it was a dark moment because I really had no B plan at that point in time. My whole life was about trying to be this tour player, and I was so confused that it hadn't worked out. And so it was a dark time in my life. I mean, I had to spend a bunch of time in therapy trying to unwind my mind around it.
Really? Okay.
And I worked an odd job. I worked in the oil field and just took a completely different path for a year, trying to just give myself some time and space, trying to figure out, how can you invest that much time and energy in something and not have it work out? It just didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, I took a year off and I worked in the oil field. I roughnecked around the world a bit, some places I shouldn't have probably gone. And after a year of that, I decided golf wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
So what was your first opportunity to kind of get in the business? Was it right after that? Or?
So I'd been working on a project in Mexico, and it fell apart, and so I was driving back from Mexico, and I had this moment of clarity. I mean, you just only get a few of them in your life. And in this moment, I mean, it was so clear, it was like, what am I going to do with my life? And I've been praying about it, and just sitting with it and trying to figure it all out. And in this moment, it became so clear, you just need to go teach golf. And I mean, the hair stood up on my arms. My eyes came wide open, and I was driving home from Mexico, and I got home about 2 o'clock in the morning. I woke up at 6:30, and I went down to the local golf course that I'm in over there, little public golf course, and a buddy of mine was running. I said, "Hey, listen, man," I said, I got a question. I said, I'm thinking about maybe starting teaching. He goes, you know something? He goes, funny you came by here today. I was just in the process of trying to figure out if I could find somebody to come out here and teach.
That's God stuff right
You think
there.
so? I mean, that was absolutely, man. So,
yeah.
So you pray for something like that, and all of a sudden, boom, there you know. So,
yeah, God had his hand on you.
And so, so I opened up my books the 1st of April, 1990. And I'll never forget, I was in this community where everybody knew me, and they said, oh my gosh, you can start teaching. So
they knew you were a good player, right?
So I'm charging $25 a lesson, an hour.
Sure you are.
So I walk out there that day, and I've got 8 lessons. My very first day.
Oh my gosh.
I walk out of there with $200 cash. I think I've
no training.
None, zero. I'm like, that is the easiest money I've ever made in my life. And I fell in love with it. I mean, the whole thing became fascinating to me.
What did those lessons look like? Do you remember?
My golf IQ is high because I'd been around some good teachers.
Well, you'd taken a lot of lessons.
I'd taken
so you
a lot
had
of lessons,
some of that, right?
And I'd studied, some of the golfing machine stuff, and I'd spent a bunch of time around people that, and thought a lot about it. So I was pretty confident I knew more than they knew.
There you go. That's the attitude you got to have.
And I was okay, and I was never embarrassed about taking their money. There were a lot of people talking about, gosh, I wish I'd have given them money back.
Yeah, heck no.
I was a lot better than they were. So
that's great.
So anyway, I got into it, and it was really cool because at that point in time, it gave me a chance to go back and rethink some things. So the process I went through was really not so much about trying to prove anything right. I almost felt like I needed to delete and just go back and try to quit worrying about trying to prove something right and wrong, and start trying to look and see if I could understand things as they were, which was a different approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So instead of trying to work it out in my mind why my David Ledbetter swing didn't work, or my my Bob Tosky swing or my whatever swing I was using at the time, why it wouldn't work, and trying to prove that right or wrong. I was like, let me just take a step backwards. I don't have to prove anything to anybody, but I want to understand this. So I took a pretty deep dive off into a couple of different areas. I was looking at the physics, the geometry, trying to understand that first. And
where did you go to get that information at that time?
I read mostly about it.
That's what, like when we were younger, we read books.
Yeah,
nowadays, the kids are looking at videos.
So Michael Hubbard had done a bunch of work, and I looked at his stuff, some of the golfing machine stuff. I looked at, I just started kind of trying to find things that captured my attention that I said, okay, I think this is going to help me. So this becomes real intuitive now. I'm just like, I'm looking at things and almost putting my hand on it, yes or no. This, I'm going to read this, and no, I'm not going to read that. This feels like this fits. No, I'm not going to mess with that right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm very intuitive, very spirit driven. And so I'm working my way through this, trying to pick up all these things. And now meantime, right, I've got 5 or 6 of my buddies that are still on tour. Yeah. And they said, "Oh, you're going to teach? Well, you can teach me."
Ah, there you go.
So that kept me out there on the tour. So I could go out there on the tour a few times a year, and I bought a camera.
Wow.
And so I would go out there, and I would do my work with them. In my backpack's my camera. And then when I got through, I'd shoot film of Faldo, and I'd shoot film of Seve, and I'd shoot film of Norman, and Ian, Ian
You're
Woosnam.
collecting videos.
And I'm trying to look at these swings that I like, and I'm trying to look at them, not to try to prove anything, but just try to start figuring out what am I seeing? Try to understand them. And so I went to work on accumulating kind of this knowledge of movement, of physics, of geometry, and then the next level of things was, okay, trying to figure out what some of these other teachers knew. So the Atomic teachers, PGA stuff that was on, the Atomic stuff, all the top teachers presented, so I got a chance to listen to them. And then I actually started kind of working from there, kind of outside the box. That's where I got off into anatomy and physiology. I did a deep dive off into that. Yeah. I studied biomechanics, neurosciences, anything that I thought might could potentially be interesting, right? Developmental sports science, and just I would figure out, somebody that was good at one of those things, and I would call them and go see them.
That was one of my questions, was in those different genres, like neuroscience, biomechanics, swing theory. Yep. You've mentioned that a little bit. Performance, as we'll kind of get into now, what you're really big into. Like, who were some of your influences early on? And what did you learn from them?
So I think, in terms of the anatomy and physiology, there's a guy named who wrote a book called Yoga Anatomy. It's written by a guy named, I'll think of his name here in a minute.
Sorry, we can always put it in the show notes.
I can't believe I can't draw a blank. Anyway,
he need an assistant.
Yeah, exactly. Right. He had an online course that I studied up on.
Okay.
I spent a bunch of time with Deborah Graham, who I thought had a really good background in terms of kind of the neurosciences, and while she was a psychologist and psychiatrist, her understanding of the nervous system was great. I spent a bunch of time studying some of the learning stuff from Schmidt and Lee and those guys, trying to understand motor learning and how people learn and how to change patterns. And so, I was just jumping off in any well that looked like it was swimmable, And so,
way ahead of your time at this point, though.
Yeah,
you got to be what, late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, I'm not even 30 years old.
Right.
I'm off into this stuff.
That's incredible.
And there was nobody else out there doing this stuff.
Right. That's what I mean. I know that time. That
There's
time
a void.
There was nothing going on except for looking at video, basically.
That's correct.
2D.
So anyway, I'm continuing to run around, upskilling my knowledge on all these different areas, and I rode that for about 10 years. All right, 10 years of.
And you're still teaching at this same place?
Yep.
Just your club there? Or?
I taught for 3 years there. I had a year where I went to work on putting together an academy for a big club, and then in '93. Butch Harmon was teaching at Cypresswood in Houston, and he had taken the job at Lochinvar. And so the guy that was running the show over there was a friend of mine. So I went over there to talk to him, and he goes, "Hey, Butch is leaving. You want to move over here?" I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be great." So anyway, Butch was still coming back and forth, and so I spent a bunch of time around Butch during that time, and he was. He was teaching Norman and
I was going to say
Tiger and
right at the beginning of his heyday, right?
Right when Tiger showed up, Davis Love was always hanging around. So
what did you take from Butch at that time? And So it would be amazing.
Yeah, so
to hear.
I think Butch was really the first coach I ever saw. I mean, I've been around some good technical guys, but he has the ability to kind of connect with those guys.
He's coming on the podcast this week, by the way.
He's
so
amazing.
I would love anything that you can share would be amazing.
No, I mean, he has the capacity to sit down, tell you like it is, and then help you instill belief in yourself that you can do things. He did it with me.
He's a motivator,
coach.
wasn't he?
As a coach, he told me, son, you can do this.
Wow.
You're good. You're great already.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
and I'm.
How much confidence does that give you?
And my confidence was not high at that time.
Yeah.
You know, I was still trying to kind of put it all together.
Wow.
You know.
Yeah.
So I mean, one of the other really incredible, great things of Forrest Gump fortune that I've had is running into the Harmons. They looked after me. They helped me. They stood me up on my feet and patted me on the back and said, "Dude, you got this. You're good at it."
Wow.
And it took me a while to believe it, but every time I heard it, I believed it more.
There you go.
And so, I mean, that's what a true coach does, right? It kind of stands
Absolutely.
up and
Yeah,
helps you.
mentor, right?
Exactly
I mean, it's just that's amazing.
So anyway, so I did that, and it was interesting because all my buddies that were on tour at the time, they started tapping out. They started getting to the end of their careers. And I woke up one day and I had this knot in my stomach, and I realized that something thing had gone really wrong. And the thing had gone really wrong was I had spent a bunch of time out there running around servicing these tour players, but I hadn't developed a single one of them. And that became very disturbing to me. So I started looking around the world, trying to figure out places around the world that they were developing players. And at that point in time, Australia had 30 on the men's and women's side. Both, if you combine the amateur and professional rankings, they had 30 players on the tour, or 30 players in the top 100 in the world between the men's and women's side of golf, right? Out of a country of 20 million people. So Texas is 20 million people. So I did the math pretty quick and said, that's a pretty high instance of success.
Yes.
We don't have 5 of them in this state, and they've got 30 on both sides. So I started trying to figure out who the guys were that were running the program, and it took me a while to figure that out. They were big self-promoters. And I finally I went to a conference and ran into them in Scotland, and they adopted me.
Who was in charge of that program?
So at the time, Mark Holland was in charge of it. Ramsey McMaster was really kind of the mastermind behind it, and I think Dennis McDade had kind of just joined on as kind of the Victoria Institute of Sport coach. He coaches Leishman now, and you had Banny and Lynchy that had done a bunch of good work, and they were over here working, and so it just basically opened this door into this space where I got to go talk to these guys that actually developed these players from 13 and 14-year-old players into these world-class players.
So what were they doing differently than you were doing, and what did you learn?
Well, I mean, I think that they were focusing more on development instead of they were very clearly focusing on developing athletes. And developmental sports science looks a lot different than a lot of the coaching that happens. So it's taking athletes through these developmental platforms, these developmental down this developmental pathway, and not fast tracking them. So, for example, one of the things they weren't doing with their kids is there wasn't an 8 and 9-year-old champion in the country. They wouldn't let them compete really at any real high level till they were 14 or 15 until they were stable enough to be able to handle themselves, right?
Yeah.
And then they move them into this international. So as they kind of develop technically and physically and mentally and tactically, once they got to a level where they felt like they could have success, then they would put them up in the next bracket. So they weren't trying to just push them up as fast as they possibly could.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just to segue into that is, I've got some friends that are from Europe, but they teach over here now. But the quandary that I always have with these kids is they have that huge growth spurt, right, from like 12 to 14. And I've heard, like in Europe or maybe in other countries, sometimes they'll hold them back from tournaments because they understand they're going to go into a slump. Yeah. Is that something that you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. So puberty does crazy things to the body, and you see these little kids with these beautiful golf swings start going through puberty, and then all of a sudden they just can't do anything.
Yeah.
So
arms and legs flying everywhere.
So and what happens to the body is as you mature, is the bones grow first, then the muscles, then the nervous system. So the first thing that happens is you got these little limber guys. As soon as those bones grow, these muscles go on on stretch, and they can't move, right? They've got these long limbs, their center of gravity's changing, and so they start moving. And we've all seen it, right?
Yes.
And the faster they grow, the worse it gets. So the best thing you can do for a kid like that is actually pull them back, sit the parents down and say, hey, listen, let's not try to continue to try to push the foot on the gas. Let's get through puberty, reorganize, and then we'll get back on the go again. And most of the countries overseas, they do it. I don't see it happen very often here. I do it all the time with our kids.
That's great to hear, because I'm always in that situation, and I don't know what to do. Like my best guess is like I want to see them more often, because one day they're doing something, next day they're overdoing it the other way, and they're growing. Like I said, they're testosterone's going crazy, and I just don't know. That's great to hear, like what you do with that.
Yeah. So the best thing you do is turn the heat down. Let's just slow the train down here for a while, okay? Let's
not put the pressure on the results.
On the parents, on the kids. I mean, because you lose a lot of kids in puberty.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things that I loved about what they were doing in Australia at that point in time was they said, hey, listen, we've only got 20 million people here, so the kids that get into golf, we cannot lose them.
Yeah.
Right? Because they'll fall off to another sport. We have to keep the kids that come into this game. We have to keep them in the game. And so they were very hell-bent on trying to kind of make sure that they didn't lose any of them. And so they were, in those moments, they were really mindful and about, let's try to do what's best for this kid. Let's slow the train down. Let's let him get through this, and then we'll reorganize on the backside of it, right?
I love it.
So, So I learned this craft, right? And it took me a couple of years. I mean, I shut my tour business down for
I was going to say, what are you doing? Did you take a little bit of a break there and say, let's learn some stuff?
Yeah, so I was in this mode of trying to understand how to do this. And it took probably the course of 2 or 3 years. I would have made probably 6 or 7 trips to Australia. And they were great with me. I mean, they opened the vault and just basically took me through the whole thing. And
wow.
So I came back to Houston. We had opened our facility at the Woodlands and started kind of looking across the landscape there, and I said, okay, I'm getting ready to take this on and try to get back in this high performance game. So we looked at our landscape of kids and said, I'm going to pick 6 or 7 of these kids, the ones that I think have the potential, and I'm going to take these things I've applied and to this particular group of kids and see if I can get them to, see how far I can get them.
Right.
So Jonathan Vegas was in that program. Stacy Lewis was in that program. Katie Future was in that program. A kid named Bobby Gates who got to the tour and had to retire because of his back.
Yeah.
Bronson Burgoon, who's on the tour, was in that program. Patrick Reed walked in late. He was in the program. We had Mark Hubbard came into the program. And so we had Maria Martinez who ended up getting her card. As the only girl from Venezuela to get a card. She had to retire because of an injury. But all of a sudden,
this was your junior program.
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
So, and I learned a couple things. First off, that a lot of the kids in the U.S. system, we think juniors are until 18 years old. Mm-hmm. So the Olympics says that you can be a junior until you're 24. And what happens in this country is they get to 18, we ship them off to college, and all this support, this great support they've had growing up,
they lose it.
Yeah. So what the people at Golf Australia were saying, you cannot give up that time. You have to. And so I was up talking to the coaches, telling them, hey, I'll take him home. Okay. I told Coach Fields, I will take Jonathan Vegas home if you do not honor and respect what we're trying to do.
Wow.
And to his credit, he backed up and gave us the room to space to do it.
That's great.
So, but
that's a whole nother. Yeah, I was gonna say that's a whole nother subject as far as like how college coaches are either helping or hurting.
Yeah,
kids.
well, I think the system is actually set up for college golf. It's a recruitment. It's a recruitment and it's a recruitment and competition based program. It's not development.
Right.
And that's where we lose a lot of our kids. We have a lot of the kids in this country that we lose in college golf. And we'll talk about that. And I'm not throwing the college golf system under the bus.
No. But I mean, this is such an important topic of how us coaches communicate with the college coaches when we send our kids off to their programs. Like, how do we make it work?
So the people from Golf Australia would sit down, and here was their idea. Okay, the Golf Australia people would have put $25,000 or $30,000 a year in a kid, but between camps and equipment and training and whatever, or travel, right?
Yeah.
So let's say a kid gets in the program when he's 14 years old, right? So he's 14 years old. He goes off to college when he's 18. They put $120,000 in, right? So in their mind, I'm vested in this kid.
Yeah.
I cannot afford to have you mess him up. So you can go to college, but they will walk in with the kid and say, hey, listen, these are the terms, right? We've got more money tied up in than you are. Okay, so either you do it our way or you don't do it.
Yeah.
And they were awesome at that. And that's why I learned that. You just step in there and say, hey,
tell me about the conversation with Coach Fields.
Okay, so Jonathan had played a summer, I guess, after his high school year. He was getting ready to go to college. Mm-hmm. It took him a while to learn English, so he's 19 going to college, but he's played this summer where he's gone and played these big amateur tournaments and smoked it. I mean, he's averaged 70. Probably could have gone to tour school. He was playing so good. I mean, wow. His stats would say that he was probably good enough to go to tour school. So he gets up to school the first couple of weeks, and Coach Fields, and they go off to the first tournament. He shoots like 276s and 77, and I'm like, what is going on? So we had a hurricane blow in, and I've got to leave Houston. So I called JV up in Austin. This is like 3 or 4 weeks after school started, so late September. So I roll up to Austin, and he goes, great, man, I'd love to come by. He said, I kind of got off the rails a little bit and just want to have you take a look. So I walk out on the range, and there's JV. The wind's blowing, and he's slouched over it, and he's clubbed way outside. He's hitting this big, long, lazy swing and this big, huge slice on the range. I thought he was goofing around. And so I'm sitting there watching this, and he keeps doing it, and he had run into this guy named Dick Kemp, who had basically became his U.S. guardian. The guy was an absolute guardian angel. The guy came from nowhere to save JV. Mm-hmm. But he had met JV, and he was going to become his U.S. legal guardian so he could help him outside of the U.S. college golf system. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we're standing on the range. Dick's going, watching him, and here's JV hitting these big slices, and he can't hit it on the face. And I'm like, JV, what's going on? He goes, I said, what have you been doing? He goes, just not hitting it very well. I said, well, what have you been working on? He goes, well, I forgot to tell you. He goes, Coach Fields has been working with me a little bit. I said, oh, really? I said, what did Coach Fields have to tell you? He said, he told me that, the best players in the world hit big fades, and they bomb and gouge it, so they hit it like as far as they possibly can. He said, I got a 46.5-inch driver coming, and he says he thinks my style is going to be kind of this big, long fade, bomb and gouge game. And I'd spend...
What was his pattern before? A draw?
Well, I mean, this kid could do it all.
Yeah.
I mean, he could flight it. He can control his trajectories, curves. He was a good wedge player. Mm-hmm. His basic pattern was a slight draw, but he didn't move it much.
Yeah.
And my jaw hit the floor. And so I went over to Dick, and I said, and Dick was a big alumni for UT Golf. He wrote the biggest checks every year for the UT Golf team. So I went over and I said, Dick,
we got a problem.
He says, can you fix him? That's what he says to me. I said, yeah, I can. I wired him up. I know how to fix him.
Yeah.
I said, but one or two things is going to happen here. Okay. Either you're going to tell Coach Fields that he is off limits, and if he ever touches us again, I will take Jonathan home. Right? I said, when his dad left him here with me, I said I made a promise to him that I would not put him in harm's way. And right now, what's going on here puts him in harm's way, in my opinion. Yeah. So you tell Coach Fields, I will take him home if you won't leave him alone. You can have that conversation, and you can tell me how it turns out. So I went to work with JV, and off goes Dick. So I see him walking down the road. He's got his arm around Coach Fields. They're walking down the...
Oh, he's there.
They're on property.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't realize
They're walking up by the clubhouse, and I'm like, well, that'd be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So he comes back, and he goes, it's done. And Coach Fields never said another thing to him.
Good for him.
So, but it took a fight. I mean, that was getting ready to go a really bad direction. And Coach Fields is lovely, and he's smart, and he's been successful. Great. I mean,
Absolutely.
I love the man.
Yeah. Yeah.
But...
Well, I think a lot of times they don't realize, like, just a phrase can throw a kid off.
But it was this collision between these two philosophies. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to use a developmental philosophy to develop Jonathan into a great player, and he's trying to recruit him and make him compete, right? So the idea in college golf, if we go out, I'm going to go out and recruit all the best kids I can, right? Get out of class. I'm going to toss them in a pin. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make sure they stay eligible. I'm going to make sure that we field a team every week, let them compete. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to find the next group of kids, and I'm going to toss them in the pen. And it's the survival rate there is not great.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the profile of most college kids, is they'll get a couple pretty good years of golf because they're riding that support that they had kind of coming out of high school. But if they're not able to reestablish that, by the time they're juniors and seniors, they go on a downward slide that a lot of times they never stop.
And it's because we lose
development.
but we lose touch with the coaches that have raised them.
So this development stops.
Yeah.
And so once development stops, and they're having to compete, and the stresses of college, I mean, the gym programs, the studies, I mean, it's a stressful place, right?
So how did you deal with that after that? Like, how did you guys communicate? How did you keep them on track?
So at that point in time, JV and I just would stay in close contact. He would come back down from UT, or I'd go up there probably once every month.
And you guys were close proximity, where you could actually,
he's
that
3
helps.
hours away, so
that helps.
So it wasn't like he was on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
And he was really the kind of the prototype that I used with these other players. So once I figured out that I could do that,
yeah,
I would go in on the front end of the recruiting saying, okay, this is how this is going to go. Now you can like this or not like this, but if you want this kid, this is how this happens. And you know, had a decent amount of success. I mean, it's a hard fight.
Yeah.
But it's the right thing to do for sure.
So that leads you into, obviously you had a stable of guys that you're now working with on tour, which is super cool because you've raised them.
Yeah.
It's different than a tour player just coming to you when they're struggling. Like you've literally raised these kids.
Yeah. So I think that my coaching philosophy is a lot around development. One of the people that I studied during the time that I was during that off time, and around the time I was in Australia, I also ran into, I was doing a bunch of triathlon. I'd gotten off and trying to beat my body up. I couldn't punish myself enough with golf, so I tried triathlon.
Right there with you, brother.
So anyway, I went to a triathlon conference, and East Von Bali, who is the father of long-term athlete development, got up and made this presentation to the U.S. Olympic Committee about how they're using these long-term athlete principles to develop athletes in all these sports. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds right to me, right? So I spoke with him about it, and he and I became good friends. And if you haven't seen it, there's a document that's written by the Canadian, I think it's called Trajectory, the Trajectory Program for the Canadian kind of golf.
How would you find that?
Just look it up on the internet.
It's like a paper, or is it like
it's like a 100-page document.
Gotcha.
And he goes deep off into this developmental pathway stuff. And that was my Bible. I used that as a reference. And then when I would get stuck, I'd call Eastbound and say, hey, is this right or wrong? He came down and spent some time with us. And
what were some of the key points, or if you can share that?
I mean, I think, he was like, he was about trying to slow the process down, so, I mean, all the way back down to when you see kids on the ground, don't stand them up, keep them on the ground as long as possible, because that cross patterning is important, right? And just allow them to be an 8-year-old, so he was really hell-bent on not letting you kind of fast-track kids. So you don't play an 8-year-old against a 10 or 12-year-old. That's bad. He didn't like the idea of superimposing male programs on children. He didn't like the idea of superimposing male programs on females, because all that does is shortens athletes' careers. They start trying to push too hard. They don't have time to learn how to win. I mean, Michelle Wee was a perfect example of that.
I was going to say, that came to mind.
Michelle Wee was the best female golfer that came out of this country in a couple of generations. Right?
Yeah.
And so not only did he not let her beat up on all the 12-year-olds, we made her at 12 try to compete against the women. She never really won there. And if they're like that wasn't enough, we're going to make her play against the guys.
Right, yeah, right? Crazy.
And by the time she's 16, she's forgotten that she's a 16-year-old girl. She can't beat anybody because she didn't ever learn how to win. You look at Tiger's dad. You stay here and beat all 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
And we'll go jump in that pool every now and then, but you're going to stay right here, right?
Yeah.
The Williams sisters, same thing. Did a good job of keeping them, not over-competing them, making sure that they could handle their peers. And then once you can get to where you can handle them, then we'll kind of take it on.
You work with Lexi still, or
yeah. I mean, I go in and out of Lexi's world. I mean, she and I have. I'm kind of like the fireman in her life. I mean, when things kind of get off, I get a call from them and we get together. So we've been kind of on and off since 2018. I'm sorry, 16. So wow. She's lovely and just an incredibly gifted athlete.
I mean, incredible.
And so, I mean, just in terms of one of the most natural athletically gifted warriors, and she is a warrior.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much is her mental toughness?
She is something
the whole
else.
thing. She seems to have the entire package.
I think one of the people I studied with is a guy named Jerry Lynch, and Jerry talks about developing warrior culture. Talks about the New Zealand All Blacks and how do you take that from a team concept into an individual sport, and she is a warrior. I mean, by definition, she exhibits all the qualities: the fearless, focused, calm, decisive. I mean, she's an absolute warrior. I have so much respect for her, and it hasn't been easy for her. I mean, she's playing her 12th U.S. Open, and she's 25 years old.
Incredible.
Think about that.
Yeah, she seems like she's 40.
Yeah,
she's been out there so long,
exactly
right?
So
it's kind of crazy. So, yeah, before we even transition into like your work with your other tour players, I love when you talk about learning from other sources outside of golf.
Yeah.
Right. Talk about some of your other influences and maybe any book ideas or things that come to mind as far as just things that are off topic that you could share.
So I think Leslie Kamenoff was the name of that guy that wrote that book, Yoga Anatomy. That was a really big aha moment for me because I actually got to learn how the body actually works. And so it also gives me not only the understanding of how the muscle slings work through the body and how the body is actually designed to work, but I can have a big, detailed conversation with any physio or any doctor in the world. My understanding of anatomy and physiology is my IQ there is high.
From yoga.
Yeah, well,
that's cool.
From this Yoga Anatomy book.
Yeah.
So Leslie Kamenoff, if you haven't, you need to go check out his work. It's fantastic.
I need to do that.
There's a guy named Jerry Lynch who runs a group called The Way of Champions. And Jerry is a behind-the-scenes guy. He runs around with Phil Jackson. He ran around with Steve Kerr. Complete behind-the-scenes guy, but establishes culture for these big winning organizations.
And you've been to one of his programs, haven't you?
I spent a bunch of time with Jerry.
Yeah.
Okay, and Jerry's become like my go-to guy. So when I get stuck and I need to get it right, I call Jerry. He's wise. He's like 75 years old. He's got, at last count, I heard 37 world and national championship rings from different organizations he's been involved with. He was involved with all Phil Jackson's teams and Steve Kerr, and he talks about the development of warrior culture. He believes that the culture that the athletes bring drives performance instead of the other way around. So he starts with let's get our headspace right, and let's talk about who we think we are, right? So culture is...
How do you develop that early on? I mean, that's a great...
It's with mindfulness and discussion about it. So he said, okay, if you're going to be a warrior, okay, if you're going to compete, by definition, you're a warrior. Okay? So you have to develop a culture that supports you being a great warrior. He talks about the New Zealand All Blacks, which is the best sporting organization in the world. So over the course of their 40-year existence, they've won 87% of their matches.
And what sport is this? I'm not familiar.
They play rugby.
Oh, rugby. Okay. Yeah.
So they are the premier rugby team on the planet. But from a sporting organization perspective, they have never passed out a most valuable player award for a game, for a practice, for a season. Not one. What they do is...
A little different than the NFL.
Right. So what they do is at the end of every practice, every game, and every season, they recognize people on the team that personified the values that they hold to be necessary to be successful. So today I want to recognize Jason for his selflessness. This is exactly when it happened. You guys all saw it. You want to know what it looks like? That's the way you do it, and that's who we are. Okay? So they remind everybody every day that this is who we are. So culture is this is the way we do things here. By definition, that's a simple way to think about it.
Yeah.
And so the hard part I had with making this transition was taking sporting culture, organizational culture, business culture into an individual sport.
Yes, because it's more of a team.
So I talked to Jerry about it. I said, Jerry, I get it. How do you do it with an individual sport? He goes, an individual is just an entity. The athlete has to sit down and determine their own culture. So I'll tell you a cool story about that.
Yeah.
So I've been studying this stuff, and this is rolling up on the 2016 Olympics. And I was coaching a woman by the name of Maria Verchinova. Maria was a European tour player, Russian. She was super athletic. She was beautiful, and she could play. And the biggest underachiever I'd met up to that point in time with golf. I mean, because there's nothing about what she was doing that looked like she would be anything but a top 10 player in the world. And so we're rolling up on these Olympics. She had been overseas playing in Europe. I got a call from a buddy of mine in Dubai. It says, "Hey, listen, she's come to the States. She's looking for a coach. Can you help her?" I said, "Yep." She came over. We got going pretty good. Some good work put together. And here comes the Olympics. So as these Olympics get closer and closer, I can tell she's getting more and more anxious about something. I have no idea what it's about. So she says, so we get about 8 weeks out, and she walks into my office, and she's just on the edge of her seat. And I'm like, "Maria, what's going on?" She goes, "Man, this Olympic thing has really got me worried." I said, "Worried?" I said, "I hadn't had one in 100 years." I said, "You're going to get to go be an Olympian. There couldn't be any better." She goes, "Yeah, I hear all that." She goes, "But you don't understand." I said, "Well, enlighten me, She said, she said, I've had friends of mine that have been Olympians in Russia before. And if you go and you have a really good Olympics, you come back and like the whole world opens up." She said, "I've also seen people that have gone and struggled at the Olympics come back, and it is not good." I said, you get ostracized by people. The government's not nice to you. It's never good. It's not good for your family. She goes, "I'm just afraid I'm going to go play poorly, and it's going to be bad."
Wow. What pressure.
And I'm like, and I'm just on the back side of this thing with Jerry, and I said, "Well, let's do this." I said, "We have to prepare you to go play great. This is a big event for you." I said, "So let's talk about the qualities that you need to bring to that event. What culture are you going to bring there?" I said, "You're going to be a warrior. You're going to play great." I said, "But what qualities do you have to bring to that event to do that?" She goes, "Well, I can't be scared." I said, "I agree. So you're going to be fearless, right?" "Yeah, fearless. I like that." Okay, so what else you got?
So are you writing this down?
Yeah, so writing it down.
I was going to say, this seems like a great exercise. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so I said, we're gonna get 5 of them.
Yeah.
I said, we're gonna come up with 5 good ones. I said, so fearless. I said, what else? She goes, I get in those moments and my attention bounces around. So I said, focused. Yeah, I want to be focused. Okay, perfect. Okay, so fearless and focused. Or what else? She goes, I get in those moments and I get to where I can't make a decision. So I said, decisive. Yep, like that. She goes, I'm going to be calm. I get a little bit jumpy and nervous. Okay, and then there was one other one. I can't remember exactly what it was. So we write these things down on a piece of paper, and I said, okay, now this is how this works, right? When you get to practice every day and you slam the trunk, you become the warrior. I said, so we need to also come up with an archetype, a picture of you being the warrior. Okay,
like your alter ego.
Your alter ego.
Yes.
So
yes.
So she comes up with this picture of her standing there with her hands on her hips and glasses, and I said, she goes, this is me being a warrior.
Superhero.
I said, perfect. I said, looks like Superwoman. That's perfect. Let's do that. So I said, we put a card together with that picture on the back, the words. I said, this goes inside your yardage book. Oh, I said, now if you ever get to a moment during this event where you forget that, you take your hat off, you put it back on, you become the warrior. So you slam the trunk in the parking lot and you put your hat back on. Those are your 2 cues. You got it? So we built this into this practice, and her caddy was there, and he was into it, and I was into it. And every time I said, "You're a warrior," I mean, so she gets on. Did
you give her a name?
No, we did not.
Okay.
So we get on the air. She gets on the airplane to leave, and she goes and she takes off. Right? She goes down to Brazil. She's hanging around even par for the first 3 days, and the last round of the tournament, she goes out and shoots 62.
Whoa.
So now she's set the course record, Olympic record, right, for score. She misses the medal by a shot, and she comes back. I'm like, wow, that was cool. So she goes back to Europe, and I don't see her for a couple weeks. So 2 or 3 weeks goes by, I don't hear from her. I'm thinking, well, hopefully she's getting some rest.
She didn't call you after?
Well, I mean, we're talking, but
yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, we're going to get back and start training.
Yeah.
About a month goes by, and she's still, on holiday. And so I called her. I said, Maria, what are you doing? She goes, oh, I'm just here hanging out. I said, well, when are we going to start training? She goes, oh, I was going to call you. I said, what are you going to tell me? She goes, I'm going to retire. I'm like, you're doing what? I said, you're just getting this stuff. You're getting it together,
Yeah.
She goes, remember the story I told you about people that go to the Olympics in Russia and do well? She goes, I've come back, and I'm sitting here looking at $1 million worth of contracts on my desk. I cannot afford to play golf anymore. I've been sporting line, clothesline. I've got all this opportunity with these magazines. I've got all these 4 or 5 things that come up, and I can't afford to play. And so she retired.
Oh my gosh!
She stepped away. She had a 5-year-old daughter, and she's gone on. She's married a guy in France, and having a lovely life and making a ton of money.
Incredible.
Because she got her culture right. And I mean, I've taken that play sheet. And I've done it I've worked it with Jonathan Vegas. I mean, I do it with all the athletes that I coach. Right? So part of, when we first sit down, we talk about a couple things in terms of high performance. Mm-hmm. What is your intention? How good do you want to be? So if you want to be a tour player, I'm not interested in coaching you. I need something more out of you. I think you're better than that. So tell me where you're on the world ranking list. So
this is a tour player coming to you, or are you talking about?
Yeah, any developmental player. So
you want a bigger goal than just being a tour player, you're saying?
So Graham McDowell came in and said, I want some help in my golf game. Okay, well, what type of help you want? Well, it's just wishy-washy stuff. And I listened to him carry on, and I'm like, I'm not interested. He goes, what? Like he's shocked. I said, I think you're better. I know you can play. You can be a top 20 player in the world. And I'm not saying you have to be top 20.
Yeah.
But you got to give me something.
Let's stretch.
Yeah, let's go back and he goes, yeah, I want to be top 20 in the world. I said, okay, well that gets you into all the majors, and you can finish up your career, and you've still got it in you, man.
Right.
And so he's like, yeah, okay, let's do that. So we sat down, we set the bar at 20th in the world. We get all the benchmarks from my statistician, so we know exactly what he's got to do. Mm-hmm. We set the culture, and we go to work. And the work is only based on, okay, what you're doing well, what needs work, and what's the plan, and just staying in that little loop, right? So once you kind of get those basic things, get the intention set, get the culture set, and kind of figure out what the benchmarks are, it gets really pretty simple.
Benchmarks being the stats, right?
Yeah, the stats.
Yeah, because you mentioned that today, and we can kind of transition into Patrick's, your work with Patrick. Sure. I think it's a good segue. Yeah. Tell the story. I guess, let me backtrack. Like, obviously you guys met when he was a junior, and you brought him up to college. And then as you started to work with him as he got on tour, talk a little bit about those days. And then I love the story you told today about after he won. And then you got the type of player he is and how he wants to get better. He doesn't celebrate long. He's like, okay, what's next? Talk about that.
Yeah, so I'd met Patrick when he was in high school. And, you talk about serendipity and strange God things, right?
Yeah.
So Jonathan wins Palm Springs in 2011. We go to Augusta, and guess whose house we rent? Patrick Reed's parents' house.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, because he's from Augusta.
So his parents jump out of the house, and we jump in. And I'm staying in this room, and it's got all these pictures of this kid. All these trophies. I'm like, oh, the kid looks pretty good. So Dick Kemp had known them, was Johnny's buddy. And so he says, I want you to meet Patrick while we're here this week. So in the middle of the field out there between just the right of 18, we have this introduction. Hey, I'm Patrick Reed, and here's this kid. He's not even in college yet. So we meet him. I keep an eye on kind of the college golf scene. I'm seeing he's tearing it up. And
this is when he's at Augusta?
No, he's not even in college yet.
Oh, he's not. Oh, he's okay, gotcha. He's still in high school.
So next thing I know, no, he would have been in college.
You said you were keeping an eye on the college scene.
Yeah, college scene. So he'd gone to college, right? Because he showed up on my doorstep at the end of that year. So the year goes by. I'd met him briefly in the field. I get this phone call from his agent. It says, hey, Patrick's leaving college because of this. They're going to, next year they're not going to let the kids go through the Nationwide or the qualifying school. Mm-hmm. He don't want to park on the Nationwide. He thinks he's good enough. He wants to go to qualifying school. He's coming to Houston. His fiance lives there. He's going to need a place to play and needs a coach. Can I give him your number? I said, yeah, send him by. So Patrick comes in, sits down, and we have a conversation. And he tells me about himself, about his golf game. He's very clear about who he wants to be. He says,
I was going to say, you're going to ask him all these questions.
Yeah, he's like,
he's giving you all the answers you want to hear from.
He's like, I'm going to be a top 10 player in the world. I said, okay, all right, here we go.
So he said that early on.
Yeah, I mean, first 10 minutes.
There you go. That's a lesson right there.
So it's about the intention, right?
Yes.
And he was clear about who he was trying to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we would start working, and we take a look at his game. We have a couple of projects we're going to work on, and so we get started, and he stands out in the mud in Houston and beats balls for about 90 days. And then all of a sudden, this tournament pops up. Texas Open kept rolling through San Antonio. He says, "Hey, Coach, what do you think about me and going over Monday qualifying?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going over there." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever."
Yeah.
So he goes over there and gets in the tournament and makes the cut. Hops in the car that night, drives to New Orleans, 9 hours. Him and his wife, him and his fiance. They drive 9 hours. Gets out of the car. Mondays again. Shoots 65.
Is this when he does 6 in a row?
6 out of 8.
Oh my God.
I mean, you put a really good player out there 8 times in a year. If he makes 2, he's had a great year.
Yeah.
He gets through 6 of 8. So he almost gets his card on money just doing that. Then he goes to qualifying school, wins the first stage, wins the second stage, and gets his card the first trip through. And I'm like, this kid's the real deal. So he fumbles around with some battling a golf ball for the first 90 days. They kind of got tangled up with a ball that wasn't working for him. Walked away from his equipment contract as a rookie on tour. Said, "You guys can have all this stuff back. This is not working for me." Gets himself some new equipment, and then has his great back half of the year. So he gets to the last event of the year. He goes to Greensboro, and he wins. So by now, I've been around him long enough. I'm like, I know that if I'm going to hang with this kid, I've got to be 2 steps ahead of him always. So he's won the tournament. I know that he's going to come back to Houston, and he's going to say, "Yeah, Coach, that was great, and what's next?" And that was we were about a 30-second celebration, right? So the Sunday night after that, I called this buddy of mine, Stuart Leong, who was doing all this really cool stat work, and I said, "Dude, I'm sending you, I want you to look at this." Shots to hole, yeah. Stuart Leong, shots to hole. So I called him and I said, "Hey, dude, I want you to look at this kid's data. I need it turned around quick. I'm not telling you anything about it. I just want you to look at it and tell me what you think." So he calls me back 24 hours later. He's ground through all this data and says, "You need to ask this person, whoever he is, if it's more important to be close to the hole off the tee or in the fairway. You need to also ask him why he misses par 3s off a tee, misses the green more often than he does from the same distance out of the fairway. You need to ask him why he's not very good inside 30 yards, and why he's poor at fairway bunker shots." Just ask him those 4 questions, see what he says. And of course, none of these things are on my radar. I had not thought of any of them.
Yeah.
He gave me all the backstory and the ability to defend myself on the answers. And so I sat Patrick down and I said, "What do you think? Is it more important to be, close to the hole or in the fairway?" He goes, "Oh, it's close to the hole." He said, "Shots to hole. Shots gained. That's what it's all about."
Yeah,
I said, "That's true as long as the ball stays in the fairway." But the problem is the second that ball goes out of the fairway, the proximity doubles, and the penalty involved when that happens is 60-yard penalty.
I was going to say that stat was kind of mind-blowing today.
60 yards, 6-0. So what happens is when the ball goes in the rough, right, on the PGA Tour, the proximity doubles. So the average proximity on the PGA Tour is 5% of the distance. That's what world class is. So if you do the math on that, and let's say from 100 yards, 5 yards it would be 5 yards right and left, right? So the shot out of the rough is now 10 yards right and left. So if you took that mathematical value back into the fairway, you're playing from 160 yards, 160, right? So you got a 60-yard penalty on the PGA Tour every time it happens. Well, he didn't know that, and I didn't know it. So we said, okay, well, instead of you standing up there and trying to squeeze that driver everywhere, you're going to play 3. You're going to have 3 clubs hit off the tee, and you're going to pick the one that's going to put it in play. So he bought into that.
Yeah, I was going to say the next question would be like how you guys address that.
Yeah.
And like what was the strategy?
Yeah, so the strategy was in the practice that winter, we had a 30-day off season. We actually said, okay, we're going to work on tee shots. Right, we put cones out. We had imaginary fairway, and every day he hit 15 tee shots through the gate. 5 with the driver, 5 with the 3-wood, 5 with the long iron. We did it every day. To start building up his belief and his ability that I don't have to do a driver if I don't need it.
Right.
The par 3 thing was really a lie angle issue. We didn't know that the clubs were a little bit upright, and so we were able to kind of talk through an equipment person and start kind of looking at the flight of the golf ball. We ended up kind of getting the lie angles flattened out about half degree and got the spin axis stable on the irons, and that took care of have the shot off the tee. On the
That's
par
really
threes.
thinking out of the box right there. Like,
Yeah,
right,
exactly right.
turning every rock over.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were looking at the technique, and technique looked good.
Yeah.
I could see once we started practicing that it was happening. But I was unaware. And when I put that to him, I said, "Hey, listen, why do you miss more shots on par threes to the left? I mean, miss more par threes off a tee than you do out of the fairway?" He goes, "I miss them left all the time."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Well, do you think you should have told somebody?" So anyway, we talked to some equipment guys. They said, something, the club may be a little bit upright. So so we flattened them out a half a degree. Old school stuff. Did a line on the ball, and it wasn't right. So we got that sorted out, and stabilized the spin axis on the on the irons. Mm-hmm. I talked to him about his shots around the green. I said, "I've got." So tell me about your play inside 30. He goes, "I'm great inside 30." I said, I got some evidence that just suggests that you're not quite as good as you think you are. Okay, you need to be better. What do you mean? He started getting real defensive. I said, "Okay, just take a look. All right, you're at 5.5 feet. You need to be at 4 or whatever it was, or 6.5.
Yeah. Do you remember what the proximity was when?
I think the average proximity that we were using was like between fairway rough and bunker. Mm-hmm. That combination is 5 feet. Okay.
Yeah. What was he?
He was like 6.5.
Okay, so he was, that's
so
not good.
A foot and a half that's a lot.
That's a huge amount, yeah.
So we went to work on just training to that benchmark. 4.5 extras, we pushed it and took it to 4.5. And so all the little games we play around the green, we have a 4.5 foot benchmark. And
I was going to say, can you share a couple of those games or drills that you?
Yeah, so we'll go out and we chip and putt for score. So there's one of the things that Stuart talks a lot about is skill link. You put two skills together to accomplish a task. Mm-hmm. So getting the ball up and down is a skill link. So we'll go around the green and we'll toss down 10 balls and 5 in the fairway and 5 in the rough and let him chip a golf ball in the green and then putt it in the hole. So we keep up with the score, the club he's chosen, the position he played from, and the proximity. And his average proximity needs to be under 4.5 feet if that putting, if he's going to be sustainable at the level that he wants to in competition.
Regardless of the situation and difficulty of the shot.
Right. Yeah. So it has to net out to. So a couple of them he's going to chip in or chip to a foot. He's going to chip another couple 6 or 7 feet.
Right.
But it has to, the average.
The average. Gotcha.
So if you can get the average down there, that allows the putting numbers to cover.
Right. So now you're at 70%
exactly
make
right.
rate. Yeah.
So we train always 10% tougher than what we're looking for in competition. That seems to make it transferable.
That's gold right there. Yeah.
So if he wants 7 up and down in competition, we train at 8. Right. Always 10% tougher. Right. If we want 5%, a 5% kind of variance in terms of direction, we take it down to 2.5 or 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to kind of make training a little tougher than what's expected. And that seems to make it robust enough to transfer into a competitive situation.
Share the finger thing we talked about today with
so
5%.
So one of the things that we realize is that if you put a target out there and so all you need is one target on the range, and we normally kind of put it around the 100-yard marker. So put a 100-yard marker out there, and it'll take a cone 5 paces right, 5 paces left, and that creates this window or this gate. And then so what we do is, as we're hitting the shots, we actually use that gate to frame the shots, and so it actually creates like a cone. Mm-hmm. So at 100 yards, it's like 5 yards right and left, 200 yards, 10 yards right and left, 300 yards, 15 yards right and left. We found just by accident that if you hold up your hand with arm fully extended, 2 fingers is about 5%.
So for the podcast listeners, basically it's like aim point
it's like
express,
aim point. Exactly right.
Holding 2 fingers up.
And so now when we're on the range and practicing, if we're trying to find a gate and we can't get out there, we'll pick a target. 4 fingers would be a full gate. Okay?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then so you got 2 on the right, 2 on the left, and the curve shots will really start on the right, curve back towards the center line, and then but any ball that falls inside that gate is actually a functional shot. Okay, so anyway, we started kind of using all this stuff in practice, right? We also used it not only with his tee shots, but also to control the trajectories. We worked on trajectories and curves with his irons. Mm-hmm. And we spent a bunch of time on pitch shots from like 30 to 150. Distance control, spin control, launch, contact. And then the chip and putting game around the green kind of took care of the rest of it.
So what were you using were you using TrackMan to like measure, nothing to measure like trajectory? Just your eyes?
Yeah. So we use trajectory. The way we change trajectory is by, if you got a full swing with a pitching wedge, right? Mm-hmm. If you take a 3/4 swing with a 9-iron, it goes out of a little lower box, goes about the same distance. Half swing with an 8-iron and a pendulum 7, they all kind of go through different windows, right?
Okay.
So we actually work on sending the ball through those different windows, okay?
And it's all you're just visualizing.
So we're watching where the ball lands,
okay,
and we're watching the ball go through these different windows. And
gotcha.
letting them. So instead of them sticking the ball back in stance and hammering down on it, you maintain your impact alignments, a shallow angle of attack, and that's the way the Europeans do it. The Europeans are the best in the world at it.
Right.
So you'll never see when I'm put a ball back in stance, hit down on it. They just don't do it.
No,
okay. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned Stinson today.
Yeah,
that
Stinson,
was an interesting stat.
So
tell that story.
In 2016, Henrik Stenson would have been. Is that the year he won the Open Championship?
Yes. Yep.
So he had an incredible year over here. He finished like 3rd or 4th on the money list. His ball striking numbers were unbelievable. I think he was second in second shot proximity and 4th in driving. And his driving distance average that year was 280 yards. So he's clearly hitting a 3-wood the whole time.
Yeah.
Right? Now here's a guy that can hit as far as DJ. I've seen him do it. I mean, the guy's a beast. But at 40 years old, realized that, you know something? That ball 30 yards behind DJ's, I'm going to make 50% more birdies than I am my maximum distance off the tee. So he hits it a handful of times when he knows he's got some room. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So more birdies, less bogeys, that's a pretty good formula.
Yeah.
And so I think at some point in time, you play the game long enough, and you try to understand what the game is trying to get you to do, you'll arrive at that conclusion.
Well, and obviously he had a lot of scar tissue from the driver yips or whatever, the trouble he had going through.
So Pete's brought a couple guys back from the abyss.
Yeah,
he brought Westwood back from Gonzo.
Pete's so great, isn't he?
He's the best.
Yeah, how much time have you spent with him?
A lot.
That's another one that I would love to spend some time with.
Pete Cowan is just such a one-of, and he's so smart. He is incredibly. There's a part of him that's tough as nails, but there's another part of him that's got such a big, warm heart. He has helped me so much. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, he's helped me when I get stuck. You know, after I get through talking to Jerry, I call Pete.
So top tour coaches actually get stuck?
Everybody's stuck at some point. Everything's hard, right?
Absolutely. I'm just kidding, but we're all human, aren't we?
But that's the cool thing about this tribe of people is I think the general I think spirit of what happens in our profession is that we really help each other.
We want to help each other.
Exactly right.
Absolutely.
And we want people to do well. I mean,
Yeah.
on the PGA Tour, every time somebody wins, the very next week, the first thing that happens is everybody goes by and pats the kid on the back. You may not like him, but it's always, man, I'm so happy for you.
Because they know how
it's
difficult
so
it is.
damn hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To see somebody be able to do it, you just got to be happy for them.
So how does it feel? I mean, again, obviously we're taking the ego out of play, but how does it feel to coach a player that wins the Masters?
You know, I told you about that Forrest Gump thing, and that was one of them for me. I mean, to be there with Patrick that week and all the prep work that went in, and there was a whole bunch of crazy things that happened during the week.
I was going to say, leading up to the week, did you see glimpses of him competing at that level, or
he'd actually been in pretty good form coming in.
Yeah, you always get that question in the press conferences, and they always ask, like, did you see it coming? And most of the time they're like, nah, man, I missed 3 cuts in a row, but I found something on Monday or Tuesday.
So Patrick very rarely just has one of those one-of events. I mean, he usually trends in the right direction. He's been playing nicely through the spring. He'd had a couple of really nice finishes and a couple of tournaments that kind of got away from him. And so we rolled into Augusta. His game was in good shape. We did a great job with our preparation that week. I mean, really took some time to try to understand the course. And, the week of the tournament, you have all these things that happen. I'll tell you a really crazy story.
Yeah.
He shows up on site with the head cold. So he's got a late-ish tee time, probably around noon on Thursday, and plays nice. He shoots like 67. And so he goes home that night. He's got a 2 o'clock tee time the next day. So last group off. He shows up at the golf course at 12:30, and he looks awful. Terrible. And I said, Pro, how you doing? He goes, Coach, I'm not doing very good. I said, what happened? He goes, I got this cold. I said, yeah, I know you haven't been feeling well. He said, did you sleep well? He goes, yeah, I slept great. I drank a half a bottle of cough medicine, knocked myself out. I'm like, you did what? I mean, my first impression was just to go, a half bottle of cough medicine?
Yeah.
I said, well, good news is you got some sleep. Now I got to make up a story to try to unwind all this and try to get him ready to play. So the good news is you got some sleep. I said, that stuff will cycle out of your system pretty quick. It's just dehydration. So let's get some fluid, some hydration on board. Let's get your little sports drink going, and let's drink one of those before while you're warming up, and we'll drink another one on the way to the first tee. I said, you're going to get to the first tee. There's going to be a lot of people there. You're going to get a shot of adrenaline. You're going to walk up that hill on one. You're going to feel great. And he buys into it. He's like, yeah, that sounds so good. And so he's starting to hit balls. He's going, I'm starting to feel a little better. I'm like, okay, here we go. And so he rolls out there.
So warm-up's good.
Warm-up's good.
Yeah.
And he gets up on the first tee, coughing up a lung. Off he goes, up the hill. He birdies the first 3 holes, and he kind of goes on to win the tournament. So part of coaching is being able to also kind of be in those moments, and you have to almost be able to direct the dialogue, direct the kind of the script a bit,
That's the coaching part, right?
It is, exactly right.
Like you said.
So you have to be able to think on your feet, you have to be able to be adaptive, and you have to be able to find some sort of way to craft a story that they're going to be able to kind of buy into that can potentially change the outcome. And that was a really kind of a cool thing that happened, and we still laugh about that, when we get together, and so it's been a lot of fun.
So you mentioned today, I'm looking in my notes here about. I want you to tell the story about the last putt, obviously, but something that struck me today from what you said was training to be competent training, competent training, and I would guess that's sort of performance training versus just learning a skill.
Yeah, so I think there's in golf training you have 2 different things. You have the motor pattern work that we do to try to.
So that would be sort of the training, just the skill, right?
Mostly the technical stuff that most of us are familiar with. And then you have what's called task training, where you're given a set of tasks, and your job is to accomplish the task.
Yes.
So I learned that from watching Graham Walker in England, and it was one of the coolest things. He had all these kids from the English golf squad out there in Golf Australia, and he walked out there calmly, handed them all a piece of paper, said, I want you guys to hit a few balls and warm up, and then I want you guys to run through this list of tasks. And it was like, 10 wedge shots, and then it was like 15 iron shots and some tee shots, and he would just wander by and look at them and watch a guy, and he says, where on your list? Well, I'm right here. So he'd watch him, and, if the guy did it, great. If he didn't do it, just try it again. Another failure, try it again. And after this third try, he'd like, okay, are you just having a bad day, or are you struggling with this? Right? And I'm struggling with it. Okay, well, then you can start the questioning and then kind of get into it. So it was such a different style than what I was used to, of just walking out there, seeing something that you don't like, that doesn't
just telling somebody you suck.
Yeah, exactly right. and it may not be warranted.
Right.
The guy may be either having a bad day, or he may be able to do it just fine, and you're in the middle of his stuff. Particularly these kids are in scholarship; they'll do anything you tell them. Yeah. And so anyway, it made a big impression on me. So when I came back and I had spent some time with Stuart, we had started talking about, okay, how do you develop? It's not really confidence that the players need; they need to be competent.
Yeah, I love that.
Now, where I learned that was watching Jim Furyk play at the Ryder Cup. All right. In 2014, Patrick's made the team. All right. He's on the team, and in the pod that he's training with, he's got. Let's see, it was him, Jordan Spieth. So Patrick, Jordan Spieth, Jim Furyk, and Matt Kuchar. They're in a pod together. So the old guys are playing the young guys. And in those formats, they're testing golf balls and playing different formats. And the young guys played the old guys the whole time. And Furyk had it coming out of both barrels. He was hitting the rough every hole, and the golf course was hard. Kuchar did, coming out of both barrels. Yeah. So Furyk single-handedly beat those couple of kids out of a couple of grand apiece. Okay? And he did it because every time he got up on the tee, he hit the ball in the fairway. All right? And then when he hit it towards the green, he usually went on the green pretty close to the hole. And if for some reason he missed a green, if he didn't chip it and he tapped it in, right? And every time he rolled a putt, it looked like it was going in. And nothing about that looked like golf to me. None of it.
Yeah.
The guy's the best player of his area. He's broken 60 twice, okay? But none of it looked like golf. So I left that event, and you got these two young guns. You got Kuchar, who's had this great career, and he is like in this different league, right? And I left that tournament thinking, you know something? I need to rethink what I'm doing, right? Because if somebody's good enough at something already, I have no business getting in the middle of that stuff. I would have ruined Jim Furyk, I promise you.
A lot of us would.
I would have ruined him, okay?
Yes.
If I had not taken time just to understand how competent he really was. And so I came back and started focusing more on, okay, how do you develop competence? Well, you develop competence by giving somebody a task, and they accomplish that task frequently enough, the next time the task is presented, they feel good about it. Sports psychologists call it confidence.
Yeah.
Okay, I call it competence. Okay, so I train for competence. I want you to be competent, right? And I want coaches on my staff to be competent. You know, I mean, I think there's a lot of coaches that hide behind objectivity that aren't competent. It's no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
But we should all be looking to try to be competent, right? So competence training looks a lot different than some of the other stuff I'd done up to that point. So with a lot of the players, including Patrick, we do about 20% technical training, right? Or form, or swing, or whatever it is, or putting stroke, whatever it is. And 80% of it is task training. So every day they've got a list of tasks that they've got to do. One of them is a putting drill, right? So we make short putts, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, you know, and then we hit some long putts and we putt for score. Mm-hmm. After they do their calibration work or their stroke drills, whatever. So we're on the backside of this story at the Masters, right? Patrick's won the Masters. He's wandered back in the office. Nobody's seen him for 10 days because he's been running around doing the media. Wanders back in the office, and one of the kids that's training there is this girl named Elizabeth from Venezuela. She's an excellent player. She wanders through the office. I'm sitting there with Patrick, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, Patrick, I am so happy for you." She walks over and gives him a hug. And she says, "I've always wondered what goes through your mind when you got a 3-footer to win the Masters." And he's normally really short because he's on the move, right?
Yeah.
He sat down and told the coolest story. It took him about 20 minutes in this great detail, you know.
Please share.
So he starts talking about this story. He says, you know, as a kid, he goes, "I always wanted, of all the tournaments in the world, I've always wanted to win the Masters. So when I'm putting in the dark and I'm putting with my buddies, it's like, this one's to win the Masters." And so I'm standing out there on a Sunday afternoon, about 10 days ago, and I'm looking on the green. I've done all the math, and I've got a 3-footer to win the Masters. And immediately, once I recognized what was happening in that moment, he said my mind went on go. I could feel my mind was going fast, and my heart was going fast, and somewhere inside me, there was a part of me that said, wait a minute. If I take the green jacket out of the equation, and I send all these people on me, he says, I never miss this putt because I make these all day and practice every day. So he said, once I got my head around that, I walked up there calmly. He said, there's no way I'm missing that putt. He says, I felt so good to stand over that putt.
So he basically
he shelved it all.
Decided that, he put himself in that frame of mind.
The reason he was able to do that is because he made so many in practice. And I always equate it to like a bank account. So if every putt you make is $1, and it goes in the bank, right? And so if you're in practice, you're just making putts. There's no penalty for missing. Just every time a putt goes in, you have this list of putts, and you've got to make them every day. Every time one goes in the bank, it's stacking up in the bank, right? And when you need to go write a check, guess what? There's money there.
Love it.
So in my mind, that's what really competence training is about. So it doesn't matter if it's tee shots, approach shots, wedge shots, around the green, on the green. We should all be training for competence, right? That's what moves the needle. That's what makes people play better.
Yes.
It's not all this. It's not all the other stuff. You know, trying to keep the orange box happy doesn't do it, right? You know, no harm, no foul. But I can promise you that there's a lot of really fine swingers at the golf club that aren't competent, right? And it's not because they're not able to do it. It's because their attention's in the wrong place.
Intention is a big word.
It's the word.
Yes.
It's the only word.
Yes. Me and my staff talk about that so much.
Yeah.
And like I talked about today in our little breakout, it's like I'll get people that are standing in the same place sitting there. I had a lady the other day that came in, one of my regular students. She comes in, she's working on some stuff, and she's just striping it. And I said, girl, you came in just like throwing 100, right? Like you're bringing the heat. I go, cool, let's test it. Did not move. Turn on the virtual, added a target, added some pressure, and she completely fell apart. Like, what changed, right? Like, that's what we have to be teaching as coaches.
So golf is an interaction between four things. So if you go to the World Scientific Golf Congress, they present only on four things. And these are them: the golf ball, the club, the athlete, the environment. So according to the World Scientific Golf Congress, golf is an interaction between those three things. Those four things, it's a mobile, right? Mm-hmm. And if you move one, the others have to adapt. Okay? So if you train all those things and the environment's taken out of the equation and you put the environment in, it's going to disturb the rest of them so bad they're not going to be able to operate. So you have to train the environment. I mean, Jonathan Vegas last week, the week before he went down to Mexico, calls me, it's pouring down rain, and says, let's go practice. I said, I'm good with that, by the way.
Yeah.
I've got a rain suit.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of getting wet.
Yeah.
So we get out there, and I said, what made you decide you want to come out today? Because this is unlike you. Patrick will train in the rain, but JV historically doesn't. He says, you know something? He goes, if I'm gonna play and play great, I'm gonna have to play in the rain. And I wanted to get out here and I wanted to train in the rain a little bit.
Good for him.
So, that's what it takes, right? So if your intention is to be a world-class player, you have to understand that the environment has massive impact on your. You have to be able to manage the environment. And here's something else just to chew on, right?
Yeah.
I think to be a really top-notch coach, and I'm not saying that you can't be a top-notch coach if you hadn't had some playing experience, but having playing experience helps you. And what it helps you understand is this. The environment that we play golf in is very complicated. If you start stacking complexity, complex thoughts about your swing on top of the complexity environment, it's too heavy. It will collapse every time. The great coaches that I've been around, the Butch Harmons of the world, the Pete Cowens of the world, smart. They could unload the gun on you, all right? But they're going to take some sort of this concept. They're going to try to get it down to some sort of simple form because they know when you're out there trying to hit it under the pump, your internal stuff has to be simple so that you can handle the complexity of the environment. The environment is highly underrated, and I think if you don't take into consideration your training, I think that you're not going to be able to transfer what you're doing from practice to play.
I totally agree with that. That's a great segue. One of the questions that I like to ask top coaches or high performers is the blend that we possess as coaches and teachers is what I call the IQ versus the EQ, right? The emotional intelligence. And I think that the young coaches out there, and I want to help the young coaches a little bit here, is they don't get enough of that EQ.
Right.
It's like, how is that developed? Or is there, I mean, I know it's a broad question, but obviously you possess it. Everybody that I've talked to on this podcast has that. Like, what would be your advice?
I think just understanding that Jerry Lynch and the Way of Champions, they talk about everybody can handle the X's and O's.
Yeah, the IQ, the information, it's out there, like the internet's there, the certifications are there, but it's like when you're dealing with humans, right? Like you said, like what to say to Patrick when he goes to the first tee.
Correct.
Like that's the stuff in the cracks that makes you a genius.
So I think that we've fallen in love with objectivity in the last 20 years of coaching. We're it's all got to be evidence-based. It's all got to be, if you can't prove it or if you can't measure it, we can. I mean, the list is endless about, if you can't.
Yeah.
I think that really good coaches can handle that objectivity, but they also understand there's subjectivity that comes to it. And the subjectivity is the intuition, it's the spirit, it's to be able to read the tea leaves, right?
Yes.
And you need to understand that you have to be good at both. But if you can't do the second one, you're never gonna really kind of probably reach your potential as a coach.
Yeah.
And so I think going in and maybe following the kind of Way of Champions, go listen to them and talk about what that EQ is, right? and what that subjectivity is, and how do you just start developing that inside yourself and your athletes and that connection that you have with them, because it is the kind of the stuff that nobody sees.
Yes, the intangible.
Exactly right. But you talk about intention. Intention is purely subjective.
Yeah.
Right? You talk about I to your point, I think if investing some time and some study into that area will do nothing but help you.
Yeah, and I think another word that we kind of throw around and I use a lot in the podcast is self-awareness, right? So I think it starts with us, like to be able to develop that or develop another player. I think we have to look deep inside ourselves.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
All right. You're a top coach, and would you agree with this statement that golf is nothing more than awareness training?
100%.
Okay. So all we're trying to do is train awareness, right?
Yes.
Try them to be aware of the right things at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so easy to get off track. I always say it's just a moving target, right? There's so many moving parts, and we can't be with our players all the time, and we're not always right. You know what I'm saying? We're all we make mistakes. We have failures. Sure. I mean, is there any sort of failure that you've had throughout your career that you felt like has sort of set you up for later success or something you learned from?
I learned from. I've failed a lot.
We all have. I think. If not, you're not taking enough risks, right?
That's correct. I mean, I failed in several situations. I mean, one of the things that I failed in one time was that case in point is when I first started trying to bring this team coaching thing together, right? So I come back from Australia. I realized, okay, you're going to need a sports psych person, you're going to need a strength coach, you're going to need a nutritionist, you're going to need a short game coach.
The whole team.
Right. So on my staff, we had people that were really good at all those things, club fitters. And so my thought about that was that, the best thing to do is let the athlete go spend time with each one of these people, right? Get the very, very best out of each one of them, right? And so I've got this girl, Katie Future, that's just a world beater, and she's playing great. And we drop her into this environment, and she starts struggling. And I'm like, I can't believe this is not going the right direction. Right? So, as it turns out, each one of those people she was spending time with were fun. They were super intelligent, and they were giving her great information. They all gave her homework, and she loved it, and she was super compliant. Mm-hmm. The amount of work and the amount of information that she was trying to process became so great that she got to where she couldn't play. She started going backwards, right? So she starts struggling, walks into my office one day and says, "I'm going to fire you." I'm like, okay. And it broke my heart because
you're invested.
Yeah.
And
you got to have thick skin, but I didn't see it coming from this girl because, we would worked hard. She'd done well. She got into 30th in the world, and she was doing great. And I didn't understand it. I was like, how can that possibly be? We put her in touch with all these people. So on retrospect, as I started looking back at it, trying to understand what had happened, I recognized that in this team coaching environment, it's not necessarily best for all the service providers to report directly to the athlete. Golf is the only sport where that happens. All the other sports, let's say you've got a football team, you've got a head coach. There's a quarterback coach, there's an offensive line coach, there's a defensive line coach, there's a special teams coach.
Yeah.
The coaches are accountable to the head coach, not the athlete. So that allows the information to be managed in terms of, periodized, for these next 90 days, this is what we're going to be doing. The next phase is going to be this. Yeah. Everybody's jobs are safe. You don't have to prove anything to anybody, right? But in golf, they all directly report to the player, and the player implodes under the weight of all the information. Right?
Yeah.
So the teams that seem like they're doing the best are the really small teams, right? Or teams where you have enough discipline where there is a head coach assigned to be able to process the information and say, okay, this is this is what we're going to be doing for X, Y, and Z. And I think that's TPI brought this in Golf Australia, kind of brought this idea of team coaching to the table, and I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
But there needs to be some structure in there where there is one person in charge that's going to be the head coach, right?
Yeah, because you mentioned today, I was asking about biomechanics, and like Jeff Leishman, they're getting a great coach,
fantastic.
Yeah, and I love you guys that aren't afraid to like have another source, like a Mark Bull or like a John Sinclair, to like throw them on 3D and see if there's something else, an objective look at your player, but the information comes to you. Like they're not going to like sit there and like Dr. Mark Bull's not going to sit there and tell the player all the stuff he's going to tell you.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
So, and I do think that in modern day high performance coaching, I think that's one of the ways it goes really, really bad. And so I do think that the future for all this is going to be, there's going to be organizations of teams. Mm-hmm. They're going to work together where there's a head coach. Everybody reports to the head coach. There's a plan laid out. Everybody's job's safe. We don't have to worry about, he's not paying enough attention to me, all the coach drama, right? And we focus on driving performance based on stats, based on periodization, based on good coaching principles, right? And so that's my vision for the future, and probably my next 10 years is going to be focusing on trying to kind of move down that track. We're developing some, I currently use my network that way, but possibly putting together a team, an organized team that players could come to where the team was already put together. That's
great. That's such a great answer. So a couple of quick hitters here, just personal development wise, and we'll wrap. We've talked about failures. One of the questions that I'm always curious about is, because our business can be stressful, is when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, like what are your go-tos? What do you tell yourself? Are there any tools or tactics that you do?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I'm pretty clear about is that there are neural limits. Mm-hmm. And once you exceed that neural limit, you need to recover. If you don't recover, you move into a space called neural failure or neural fatigue, where you can't operate at a high level. Sometimes you can't avoid it. It just happens because it's the nature of kind of where you are. But I am mindful of it. And so what I try to do is understand that I've got about 5 really good hours a day that I can really get everything out of myself. Anything more than that's going to put a neural consequence on me for the following day. I can do that for a day or two, but once I get too many days down the road, I'll start underperforming. I'm going to miss things. I'm not going to be sharp. I'm not going to be present, whatever it's going to be. So it's just trying to kind of manage that workload, trying to say, okay, I've got 5 hours to get my work done today. So what's going to happen in those 5 hours? Right.
So do you have any tactics like I've been dabbling in mindfulness, meditation. Obviously, we talked about working out. Like, what are your stress relievers that you kind of go to? And
mindfulness and meditation are way up there in terms of helping the brain recover. The best thing is sleep. One of the things that the tools that runs around the tours, they've got those whoop. There you go. So if you're paying attention to your sleep, that's probably the best thing you can do.
Yes.
And then try to just do the basic things, right? Eat well, try to get a little exercise, make sure that your brain has what it needs. And all the mindfulness and meditation stuff is going to be super helpful.
I like it. All right, so final question. Everybody has to answer this. You can give it some thought. But if you had a gigantic billboard, metaphorically speaking, of course, and you could put a quote, a mantra, a picture, whatever you want on it to get that message to billions of people, what would your billboard say and why?
I would just, I think probably I would say, I think I would just say thank you. I mean, as I reflect back on my life and the things that I've gotten to see, I mean, my gratitude about all that is just incredibly high. So I would make sure that everybody knew that I was grateful.
Gratitude is a big word there.
So I think that would be it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this, and hopefully we can kindle this relationship that we've created and started. I so admired your career and just the person that you are. How can people get a hold of you or say thank you? Are you on social? I know, give out your social handles because I want people to reach out. And also, if they want to work with you, obviously you're incredibly busy, but to ask questions, I think would be
I mean, you can catch
valuable.
me on Kevin Kirk Golf on Instagram. And then I think probably if you want to find me at, you can find me at the Woodlands Golf Performance Center. Phone number there, 281-863-1423.
Incredibly kind. Thank you, sir. You're the best.
Well, Jason, before we wrap up, I also want to thank you for all you do, and it's been really, really fun kind of getting to spend some time with you the last couple of days, and it seems like kind of twin sons of different mothers to some extent.
Yes.
And but I also want to thank you for all this kind of cool stuff you're doing and kind of being the drum for golf and making it better for all of us. So thank you for what you do.
I appreciate that so much.
All right, pal.
Thanks, my brother.
All right, cheers, man.
What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you jump off. First, how good was that, right? So big thank you to Kevin for coming on the show and sharing his story and his incredible knowledge and insights on coaching and teaching and just on life in general. I think it was amazing. Make sure you give Kevin a follow on the gram at Kevin Kirk Golf, and you can check him out on his website at the Woodlands Golf Performance Center. Thank you again to our sponsors, Straight Down Apparel, Hack Motion, Swing U, and enviedhemp.com. Make sure you use the promo code GURU20 for that 20% discount for life when you're buying your CBD products. You won't be disappointed. Make sure you go to the App Store and download my Golf Guru app. Thank you so much. And then a special free plug here to a new company and a new friend that I just met at the PGA magazine conference called Boomer Naturals. BoomerNaturals.com. It's a wellness company that sells a variety of products, including some really great masks that we all have to wear now. So check that out. They're not an official sponsor, but hopefully they will be someday. But I spent some time with a great guy named Matt Schumann that reps them and is a awesome young golfer and also a great individual that works for the company, and I'm a fan already, so go check it out. Please give me a follow and reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram at Golf Guru TV, and also check out my website that just got redone thanks to Swing U at golfgurutv.net, where you can find videos, articles, and more information on my teaching and coaching. If you have a question or comment, you can obviously email me or shoot me a DM. Email for the show is golfgurushow@gmail.com. Music for the podcast is brought to you by Kevin MacLeod and Zach Mullet. And as I always leave you with, RIP Mr. Rohn, study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. Thanks so much for listening. I'll talk to you next time.